The chilling revelation that the phone calls you receive every night at 3:33 a.m., where you hear your own voice screaming for help, trace back to your own grave, suggests a supernatural or psychological phenomenon that defies conventional explanation. Here's a concise exploration of this eerie scenario. The consistent timing at 3:33 a.m., often considered a witching hour in folklore, could indicate a paranormal connection, possibly tied to your own consciousness or spirit. The fact that the calls originate from a number linked to your grave, a place symbolically tied to death, suggests a few possibilities. Supernatural haunting. Your grave could be a focal point for a restless spirit, potentially your own, trapped in a liminal state. The screams for help might reflect a past or future trauma, with the calls serving as a warning or a plea from an alternate version of yourself. Folklore often associates graveyards with spiritual activity, and the specific number 333 could amplify this, as it's linked to heightened supernatural occurrences in some traditions. Psychological manifestation. The calls might be a projection of your subconscious, perhaps triggered by guilt, fear, or an unresolved fear of mortality. The grave connection could symbolize a deep-seated anxiety about death or a forgotten memory surfacing in a distorted form. Hearing your own voice could indicate an internal struggle, with the screaming representing suppressed emotions. Time or reality distortion. The tracing of the number to your grave raises questions about reality itself. This could hint at a glitch in time, where a future or alternate version of you is reaching out. The grave might not represent your current state, but a potential fate, suggesting a warning to alter your path. Alternatively, it could be a fabricated perception, possibly induced by external forces, e.g., a prankster with advanced tech or a hallucinatory influence. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay as I stood before my own grave, the phone in my hand still warm from the call at 3:33 a.m. The headstone, weathered and cracked, bore my name in stark, chiseled letters, though I was very much alive, or so I thought. The number I'd traced led here to this forgotten corner of St. Mary's Cemetery, where the grass grew wild and the stars seemed dimmer. My heart pounded, each beat a reminder that I wasn't ready to face whatever this meant. I'd come alone, armed with nothing but a flashlight and a recorder, determined to confront the impossible. The grave was undisturbed, no signs of tampering, no hidden devices to explain the calls. Just cold stone and silence. I knelt, brushing dirt from the headstone, and noticed something odd. The date of death was blank. Not eroded, not missing, just never carved. A shiver ran through me, not from the autumn chill, but from the realization that this wasn't a mistake. It was a message. My phone buzzed, snapping me out of my thoughts. The screen lit up. Unknown number. It was 3:33 a.m. again, though my watch read 11:47 p.m. Time itself seemed to bend here. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the answer button. The recorder was running, its red light a faint beacon in the dark. I pressed accept and held the phone to my ear. "Help me!" My voice, raw and desperate, screamed through the speaker. "You're running out of time." "It's coming." The words dissolved into a guttural wail, then static. My knees buckled, and I gripped the headstone to steady myself. "Who are you?" I shouted into the phone. "What do you want?" The static cleared, and for the first time my voice answered. "You're already here," it whispered, so close it felt like breath on my neck. "Look down." I froze. The ground beneath me trembled, a low rumble like a heartbeat. My flashlight flickered, casting jagged shadows across the grave. The dirt shifted, parting as if pushed from below. Fingers, pale and dirt-caked, clawed through the soil. A hand, then an arm, emerged, wearing the same jacket I had on. My scream caught in my throat as a figure pulled itself free, a perfect mirror of me, eyes wide with terror, mouth open in a silent cry. "You didn't listen," it said, voice identical to mine but hollow like wind through a tunnel. "It's too late now." The figure lunged, its cold hands grabbing my wrists. The phone fell, the recorder toppled, and the world spun as I was yanked downward, into the grave, into darkness. When I woke, I was lying on the cemetery grass, dawn breaking over the horizon. My clothes were caked in dirt, my hands scratched and raw. The recorder lay beside me, still running. My phone was gone. I stumbled to my feet, heart racing, and checked the headstone. The date of death was no longer blank. It read, August 6, 2025. Today, I played the recorder, dreading what I'd hear. My voice screaming, pleading, then that whisper, "You're already here." But there was something else, fainter in the background, a low, guttural laugh that wasn't mine. It grew louder as the recording looped, as if something else had been in the grave with us. "Tonight, I know the call will come again. I don't know if I'm the one above the ground or the one below it anymore. But I'm certain of one thing. Whatever's calling isn't done with me yet. The morning sun did little to warm the chill that clung to me as I stumbled away from the grave, the recorder clutched in my trembling hands. My car was parked just beyond the cemetery gates, but every step felt like wading through quicksand. The date on the headstone, August 6, 2025, burned in my mind. Today. My phone was gone, lost somewhere in that impossible grave, but the weight of that whisper, "You're already here," pressed heavier than ever. Back at my apartment, I locked the door and sank onto the couch, the recorder staring at me like an accusation. I couldn't shake the image of that figure, me crawling from the earth, its hollow eyes locked on mine. Was it a hallucination, a warning, or something worse? I plugged the recorder into my laptop, desperate for answers, and played the file again. My screams, the whisper, that guttural laugh, it was all there, but now I noticed something new. Beneath the laugh, faint but unmistakable, was a rhythmic tapping like Morse code. I slowed the audio, isolating the sound, SOS. A distress signal. But from who? Me? Or something else? The clock read 2:45 p.m., less than 13 hours until 3:33 a.m. when the call would come again, if it came at all, without my phone. I couldn't stay here, not in this apartment where the walls seemed to lean in, watching. I grabbed my keys, the recorder, and a flashlight, then headed to the only place I could think of, the library. If this was supernatural, psychological, or some twisted prank, I needed answers before night fell. The library was quiet, the kind of hush that amplifies every creak and whisper. I found a corner desk and started digging through local records, searching for anything about St. Mary's Cemetery or unexplained phenomena. An old article from 1995 caught my eye. Mysterious calls plague local woman. A woman named Clara Henshaw had reported receiving calls at 3:33 a.m., hearing her own voice begging for help. She traced the number to her family's plot in St. Mary's. Days later, she vanished. Her body was never found, but her grave, already prepared, had a headstone with a blank death date. My stomach churned. The parallels were too close. I cross-referenced Clara's case and found others. 1973, 1948, 1921. Every few decades, someone in this town got calls from their own grave, always at 3:33 a.m. Most disappeared. The few who didn't were dismissed as insane. One survivor, a man named Thomas Reed from 1973, had left a journal in the library's archives. I requested it, my hands shaking as the librarian handed over a brittle, yellowed notebook. Reed's entries were frantic, scrawled in uneven ink. He described the calls, the grave, the figure that looked like him. "It's not you," he wrote. "It's a mimic. It wears your face, your voice, but it's hungry. It wants your place in the world. Don't answer the call, don't go to the grave. If you do, it trades places with you." His final entry was dated the day he vanished. I answered again, "It's coming tonight." The library clock struck 9 p.m. My heart sank. I'd lost track of time, and the cemetery was a 20-minute drive. I couldn't go back there, not after Reed's warning, but staying put felt like waiting for a noose to tighten. I stuffed the journal in my bag and headed home, barricading the door with a chair. I needed a plan, but my mind was a fog of fear. At 3 a.m., the silence in my apartment grew oppressive, like the air before a storm. No phone, yet I felt the call coming, inevitable as death. I clutched the recorder, my only tether to proof I wasn't losing my mind. Then a sound, not from a phone, but from the walls, the floor, everywhere. A faint ring like a distant bell, growing louder. My breath caught as the clock hit 3:33 a.m. The ring stopped. Silence. Then a knock at the door. Slow, deliberate, 3 knocks, then 3 more. My voice, that voice, whispered through the wood. "Let me in, it's time." I backed away, heart hammering as the doorknob rattled. The chair held, but the air grew heavy, the shadows in the room stretching unnaturally. The recorder hummed to life on its own, playing back the guttural laugh from the grave, now joined by words. "You can't run, you're already here." The knocking stopped. A shadow moved under the door, too long, too wrong to be human. I grabbed a kitchen knife, my hands slick with sweat, and waited. The silence was worse than the noise. Then from behind me, a hand touched my shoulder. Froze, the cold touch of the hand on my shoulder sending a jolt through my body. The knife trembled in my grip as I spun around, expecting to see the hollow-eyed version of myself from the grave. But there was nothing, just the dim glow of my apartment, the recorder still looping that guttural laugh, and the shadow under the door, now motionless. My breath came in shallow gasps, the air thick with a metallic tang like blood and rust. The hand had felt real, not like a trick of the mind, but the room was empty, Or so it seemed. The recorder crackled, the laugh cutting off abruptly. In its place, a new sound emerged, my voice but distorted as if played backward. I grabbed the device, fumbling to stop it, but the screen flickered, displaying numbers that didn't make sense. 3:33:33. The time was wrong. It was past 3:33 a.m., yet the clock on the wall had stopped, its hands frozen at that cursed hour. The shadow under the door pulsed, spreading like ink across the floor, creeping toward me. I backed into the kitchen, clutching the knife, my eyes darting to every corner. The journal's warning echoed in my head. It's a mimic. It wants your place. Reed had said not to answer the call, but I hadn't, not this time. Yet it was here inside my home, bending reality around me. The shadow reached the edge of the couch, pooling like liquid, and from it rose a shape, tall, humanoid, but wrong. Its limbs were too long, its face a blurred smear of my own features, like a reflection in a warped mirror. "You answered," it said, my voice but colder, sharper. "You went to the grave. You let me in." "I didn't," I shouted, brandishing the knife. "I didn't answer the call tonight." It tilted its head, the motion unnervingly smooth. "You answered weeks ago, the first call. That was enough." Its mouth stretched into a smile that was too wide, revealing teeth that glinted like shards of glass. "Now I'm here, and you're already there." The room tilted, my vision swimming. The shadow surged forward, and I slashed wildly with the knife, but it passed through nothing, the blade meeting air. The figure was gone, but the shadow was everywhere now, coating the walls, the ceiling, my skin. I stumbled to the window, desperate for light, for escape, but the glass reflected not the street outside, but the cemetery, my grave open and waiting, the headstone glowing under a moon that shouldn't be there. A memory flashed. The first call weeks ago when I'd picked up in a half-asleep haze, hearing my own screams. I'd dismissed it as a nightmare, a prank, but Reed's journal had been clear. Answering once was enough. The mimic didn't need a phone anymore. It had my voice, my face, my life. And now it was rewriting me out of existence. I ran to the door, kicking the chair aside, and yanked it open. The hallway was gone. Instead, I faced a tunnel of earth and roots, the air heavy with the stench of decay. At its end, illuminated by a sickly green light, was my grave. The figure stood beside it, beckoning with a hand that wore my skin but wasn't mine. "Come," it said, "it's time to trade." I slammed the door shut, heart pounding, and turned back to the apartment. But it wasn't my apartment anymore. The walls were stone, damp and moss-covered, the floor soft with dirt. I was in the grave, or it was in me. The recorder, still in my hand, buzzed and spoke in my voice. "You can't run, you're already here." The knife was gone, my hands empty except for the recorder, its red light pulsing like a heartbeat. Then I saw it, a faint outline in the dirt, a trapdoor. Not part of the grave, not part of the mimic's game. It was old, wooden, with carvings I couldn't read but felt ancient, like the ones in Reed's journal. He'd mentioned a way out, a ritual to trap the mimic, but he'd never finished it. The door was my only chance, but opening it meant risking whatever lay below. The mimic's voice echoed behind me, closer now. "You can't leave. You're mine." The air grew colder, the shadow tightening around my chest like a vice. I had seconds to decide. I knelt, my fingers clawing at the trapdoor's edges, and pulled. The trapdoor groaned as I pried it open, splinters biting into my fingers. A gust of stale, icy air rushed up from the darkness below, carrying whispers too faint to decipher but sharp enough to prickle my skin. The recorder in my other hand pulsed hotter, its red light flaring like a warning. Behind me, the mimic's voice slithered closer, no longer just my own, but layered with others. Clara Henshaw, Thomas Reed, voices from decades past, all screaming, all pleading. "You can't leave," they hissed in unison. "You're ours." I glanced back. The mimic stood at the edge of the grave, its blurred face now a mosaic of every victim it had claimed, my own features flickering at the center. Its two long arms reached out, fingers stretching into tendrils of shadow that curled toward me. No time to think. I dropped through the trapdoor, feet first, into the unknown. The fall was short but jarring, my knees buckling as I hit a stone floor. The trapdoor slammed shut above me, muffling the mimic's enraged howl. Darkness swallowed me, broken only by the recorder's faint glow. I fumbled for my flashlight, but it was gone, lost in the apartment or the grave or whatever liminal hell I'd stumbled into. The recorder's light would have to do. I held it up, revealing a narrow tunnel, its walls carved with the same ancient symbols I'd seen on the trapdoor. They pulsed faintly, like veins under skin, glowing in sync with the recorder's light. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of rot and something sharper, like ozone after a storm. My footsteps echoed, but not alone. There was a second rhythm, a faint shuffle trailing me. I spun, holding the recorder high, but saw nothing. The whispers from the trapdoor's air followed me, clearer now. Not yours, never yours. Not the mimic's voice, but something older, angrier. The tunnel felt alive, watching, judging. I moved forward, the symbols guiding me like a map I couldn't read. Reed's journal had hinted at a ritual, something about binding the thief of faces to escape its claim. The trapdoor had to be part of it, a way to reach whatever anchored the mimic to this world. But every step deepened my dread. The tunnel sloped downward, the air growing colder, the walls tightening. The recorder buzzed, its screen glitching, now showing a single word. Run. The shuffle behind me became a scrape, then a sprint. I bolted, the recorder's light bouncing wildly, illuminating flashes of the tunnel, bones embedded in the walls, skulls with empty sockets staring back. The symbols flared brighter, their glow searing my eyes. The air vibrated with a low hum like a chant, and the ground shook, threatening to collapse. Whatever was behind me wasn't the mimic, it was something worse, something the mimic feared. The tunnel opened into a chamber, its ceiling lost in shadow. At its center stood a stone altar, etched with the same symbols, now pulsing red. On it lay a cracked mirror, its surface rippling like water. My reflection stared back, but it wasn't me, it was the mimic, its glass-shard teeth bared in a grin. "You found it," it said, voice echoing from the mirror and the walls. "But you're too late." The recorder burned in my hand, its light now a blinding white. The symbols on the altar flared, and I saw them for what they were, not just carvings, but names. Clara Henshaw, Thomas Reed, countless others, and at the bottom, fresh and glowing, mine. The altar was a ledger, a trap for souls, and I'd walked right into it. The shuffle stopped behind me. I turned, expecting claws or shadows, but instead saw a figure, human, frail, dressed in tattered clothes from another era. Thomas Reed, or what was left of him. His eyes were milky, his voice a rasp. "Break the mirror," he whispered. "It's the anchor, break it, or it takes you forever." The mimic's laughter filled the chamber, shaking the walls. The mirror's surface churned, and tendrils of shadow spilled out, reaching for me. The recorder screamed, my own voice now, begging me to run, to fight, to live. I raised it, the only weapon I had, and swung at the mirror. Glass shattered, and the world screamed with it. The mirror exploded into 1,000 shards, each fragment glinting with a sickly light before dissolving into the air. The chamber shook violently, the altar cracking down the middle as the glowing symbols, names of the mimic's victims, faded one by one. My name, still fresh at the bottom, pulsed once more before vanishing. The recorder in my hand went silent, its searing heat replaced by an unnatural cold. The mimic's laughter cut off mid-cackle, replaced by a deafening silence that pressed against my eardrums. For a moment I thought I'd won. Then the ground lurched, and a low, guttural roar erupted from the shattered altar. The air thickened, heavy with the same ozone tang I'd smelled in the tunnel, now laced with something acrid like burning flesh. Thomas Reed's frail figure staggered back, his milky eyes wide with terror. "You broke it," he rasped, "but it's not gone, it's free." Before I could ask what he meant, the shadows in the chamber coalesced, no longer formless but taking shape, a towering, writhing mass of limbs and faces, none of them mine. The mimic wasn't just one entity, it was a chorus of stolen lives bound together by the mirror's curse. Breaking it hadn't destroyed the mimic, it had unleashed its true form, unshackled from the altar's prison. The mass pulsed, its surface rippling with distorted mouths that screamed in unison, a cacophony of anguish and hunger. I stumbled back, my foot catching on a loose stone, and fell hard. The recorder skidded across the floor, its screen cracked but flickering back to life, displaying a new message: "It sees you." Reed grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "Run," he hissed. "The ritual's only half done. You need the source." "The source?" I gasped, scrambling to my feet as the mass surged forward, its tendrils lashing like whips. The chamber was collapsing, stones tumbling from the ceiling, the walls crumbling into dust. The symbols, now dull, offered no protection. Reed pulled me toward a narrow crevice in the far wall, barely visible through the chaos. "The altar was a lock," he said, his voice breaking as we squeezed into the crevice, the mass's roars shaking the ground. "The mirror was its chain. The source is what birthed it, buried deeper under the town. You have to destroy it or it'll take everyone." The crevice led to another tunnel, narrower and slick with something that wasn't water. The air grew hotter, the walls throbbing like a living thing. Reed's strength was fading, his body trembling, but he pushed on, muttering about a founder's sin. The journal had mentioned the town's founding, a vague reference to a pact made in 1840 when sent. Mary's cemetery was first consecrated. I hadn't connected it until now, The mimic wasn't just haunting graves, it was tied to the town itself. The tunnel opened into a cavern, vast and lit by an unnatural red glow. At its center was a pool of black liquid, its surface writhing like the mimic's form above. Above it hung a massive, pulsating heart, not human but grotesque, veined with the same symbols from the altar. It beat once, twice, each throb sending a wave of heat through the cavern. This was the source, the thing that had birthed the mimic, fed by decades of stolen lives. Reed collapsed, his breath ragged. "Blood," he whispered. "It needs blood to die. Yours, mine, doesn't matter, but it has to be now." The mass's roar echoed from the tunnel behind us, closer now. The heart pulsed faster as if sensing my presence. The recorder buzzed in my pocket, its cracked screen flashing. Choose. I looked at Reed, his frail body barely holding on, then at the knife I'd thought I'd lost, now lying at my feet, glinting in the red light. The mimic was coming, and the heart was waiting. I had one chance to end this, or become part of it forever. The cavern pulsed with the heart's rhythm, each beat a hammer against my skull. The black pool beneath it rippled, reflecting distorted glimpses of my face, then Clara's, Reed's, and countless others, all trapped in its oily depths. The mimic's roar grew louder, its writhing mass spilling into the cavern, a tidal wave of stolen faces and limbs. Thomas Reed, slumped against the wall, coughed wetly, his milky eyes fixed on the knife at my feet. "Blood," he rasped again. "It ends with blood." The recorder in my pocket burned, its cracked screen flashing now. The heart thudded faster, as if daring me to act. I snatched the knife, its blade heavier than before, almost alive. Reed's journal had mentioned a pact. Blood spilled in 1840 by the town's founders. A desperate ritual to bind something ancient. Something they'd woken while digging the cemetery's first graves. They'd fed it lives to keep it dormant, but it had grown, becoming the mimic, the thief of faces. My blood or Reed's could end it, or feed it forever. The mass lunged, a tendril grazing my arm, cold as death. I dodged, heart-pounding, and sprinted toward the pool. The mimic's voices screamed in chorus. "You're mine!" My own voice was loudest, accusing, pleading. I glanced at Reed, who nodded weakly, his hand clutching a shard of the broken mirror, its edge stained with his blood. He'd already chosen. "No," I shouted, not at him but at the heart, at the mimic, at the town's cursed legacy. I drove the knife into my palm, blood welling instantly, and flung it into the pool. The liquid hissed, steam rising as the heart spasmed, its veins splitting like cracked earth. The mimic howled, its form unraveling, faces peeling away into ash. But it wasn't enough. The heart still beat, weaker but defiant. Reed staggered to his feet, mirror shard in hand. "Both," he croaked. "It needs both." Before I could stop him, he slashed his wrist, blood pouring into the pool. The cavern shook violently, the heart's glow dimming as cracks spread across its surface. Reed collapsed, his body crumbling into dust, his name fading from the air like a sigh. The mimic's mass shrank, its screams fading, but the heart gave one final, thunderous beat. A voice, not mine, not Reed's, but ancient, vast, spoke from the pool. "You end one, you wake another." The pool exploded upward, not liquid but shadow, swallowing the heart, the cavern, me. I woke in my apartment, sprawled on the floor, the clock reading 3:32 a.m., August 7, 2025. The recorder was silent, its screen blank. No knife, no blood, no mirror. Just my phone buzzing with a new message. Unknown number. I didn't answer. I couldn't. But as the clock ticked to 3:33, the air grew heavy, and a new sound filled the room, not a scream, but a low, rhythmic thump like a heartbeat under the floor. The mimic was gone, but something else was awake.